Hello and welcome to In the Light, Growing Your Soul with me, Anna Isabel. And I am so happy to be welcoming back Christine Herbert. Hello, Christine.
Hi, Anna.
It's wonderful to have you back because, well, one conversation about your wonderful book is just not enough. And the book that we are talking about is called Digestion, the Key to Good Health. So welcome back.
Hi, good to see you again.
Last time we were talking about the importance of the gut microbiome and digestion in general. But at the end of our conversation, you said, and we didn't even get round to talking about IBS. And I thought, no, we didn't. So here you are. And I I think it would be good to look at, what causes inflammation in the digestive tract and what causes IBS. Because I've been reading your book, what strikes me is, there's that thing about people Googling symptoms, and there's an enormous list of the possibilities of what could be wrong.
Yeah.
And reading your book, I can see why that is because everyone is different, and the root cause of symptoms could be quite complex as well.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I've also I've also written a book on inflammation, and probably a lot of what I'll talk about this evening is based on what I wrote there, because it links all the body systems. So if there is inflammation in the body, it affects everywhere, the whole body. Um, and what it will show up, the effects will show up in our weak points. So we all have our own weak points, and most people will know where their weak points are. If they're under the weather, they maybe always get a skin rash, or they always get um, gut problems, or they always get bladder problems, and inflammation in the body will show up in that area that is weak. Um, in a lot of cases, the first area that shows up is the gut, because that's kind of the fast reacting area. And so the gut is our area that will show more than anything else. But equally, it's actually the easiest place to fix, because it will fix first, which is always nice. So causes of inflammation. The number one cause is diet. It's always diet. And there's other contributing factors around that. So diet will mean either eating wrong foods for you as an individual, or eating wrong foods in general. And by wrong foods, I mean things like sugar, ultra-processed food, things like that. Yeah. So it's wrong diet plus nearly always stress. That's often involved, and obviously it's a vicious circle, because if you've got IBS, if you've got irritable bowel, that's going to stress you. So it swings and roundabouts, which came first. But there is always an element of stress as well, and it's only when you start treating someone that you start to recognize how important, or what level the stress is important. Age, as we get older, we get more inflammation. It just goes with the process. So the more you can hold back aging, which we can do, biological aging rather than numerical aging, the better, the less inflammation. Metabolic disease and obesity comes with inflammation. They are part and parcel of the whole process. So if someone is overweight, there will be more inflammation because of that. The fat cells create inflammation. Stress, as I said, which can be physical or mental. So if someone is very ill, is under the weather a lot, if their immune system is low, there will be more inflammation because of that. Lack of exercise. Couch potatoes actually have quite a lot of inflammation going on too. Dysbiosis, and we talked about the microbiome. If there is dysbiosis, that will contribute to inflammation. I've got my list here, so I keep looking down here. Periodontal disease. If there is periodontal disease, that will, if you remember, we talked about periodontal disease and oral microbiome. that will contribute to inflammation as well. Simple poor digestion. If we don't digest our food properly, if there's something wrong, some reason we don't digest our food properly, that will cause inflammation, as will any unresolved infection. So if someone has an unresolved viral infection, if they're post-viral, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, long COVID is a post-viral thing that is actually, it's characterized by inflammation, because that the infecting agent hasn't gone away. It's still there, but the body's not able to mount a proper immune response to deal with it. So you've got this low-grade inflammation going on all the time. So that's what those three labels are. They are simply low-grade inflammation against an unresolved infection. Unresolved infection might also be fungal, it might be bacterial, it might be parasitic. So there's lots of possibles around the unresolved infection. Toxicity. If someone is in contact with agricultural sprays, with mercury, with industrial chemicals, with household chemicals, that will cause inflammation. And especially if someone is already got a weak liver, or there's some other issue going on for them, that's going to cause inflammation. And the last thing of all, really, which covers all of those, is poor elimination. If our elimination systems, so elimination systems cover the lungs, the liver, the bowels, the bladder, the skin. If those are not working, if any one of those is not working properly or efficiently, then that's going to cause inflammation, because we're going to have waste products left behind in the body that are going to cause a problem. So there's an awful lot of possible things. And as a herbalist or a naturopath or any alternative therapist will look actually at all of those, or should look at all of those, and work out what's going wrong and how to put it right. Because if you've got a source of inflammation that you don't address, wherever that inflammation is showing up in the body, you're just never going to fix the problem. You can give herbs or medications that reduce inflammation, but if you don't go to the source of the problem, it's just never going to fix. Yeah. So there's a lot to consider. There's a lot that you have to consider with any inflammatory process going on in the body. So, did you want to say? Sorry.
I was just taking that in, and sort of a million questions popped into my head, and I'm trying to think which one to go with there. Because it seems that the causes as to why inflammation would begin in the body are so numerous. And then you were talking about elimination, which to me seems like a really important place kind of almost to explore as a starting point. Because if we're not eliminating properly, then obviously it's going to cause problems. So I guess the question that I want to ask then is, what would interfere with the body's efficient elimination systems?
Okay, well, depends which system we're looking at, because there's, as I say, there's several elimination systems in the body. But so if we're talking about, let's say we're talking about the bladder, that's kind of a almost more simple elimination system. What would interfere with that would be anything that irritated the bladder, yeah, or poor kidney function. Yeah, either of those would interfere with it. So what we have to do is to look and see if something is irritating the bladder. We'll have to look and see what kidney function is like. We could give herbs that would improve kidney function, bladder function. There's a group of herbs called alteratives, and alteratives basically improve elimination systems in the body. So you would choose an alterative for the system you think needs a bit of an oomph. Yeah. So there's lots for the liver, there's lots for the bowels, there's some for the skin, some for the bladder. The liver is often a big one as well. That's often a very important organ that struggles with elimination because of all the stuff it has to do. Um, there are so many toxins around us in the air, in the water, in the food, that the liver often struggles, especially if someone drinks alcohol, takes medication, uses hormonal medication, anything like that. That all compromises the liver and stops it eliminating as it should. So, for example, dandelion. Dandelion is a wonderful liver alterative. Dandelion leaf, dandelion root, as a really nice everyday one that everybody can find alterative for the liver. It just improves its function. Anything bitter will improve liver function. So that's where you start with alteratives. You find the source, the area of the body you think is needing help, and you work that out from symptoms, from what you can see in front of you. I mean, I also use iridology, and I use tongue diagnosis. Clever people use pulse diagnosis. I'm not clever enough for that, but that is just so magnificent, pulse diagnosis. But that's what you do. You work out where the problem lies, and then you use whatever therapy you are familiar with to treat that area. And by doing that, you also reduce inflammation.
So coming to the liver, we were talking about dandelion, and you were talking about dandelion leaf and root, and it made me wonder about the flowers. What about dandelion flowers? Are they of no help?
Oh, yes. I wouldn't particularly use them for the liver. Dandelion flowers actually make a really nice flower essence. So dandelion flower essence is for people who can't relax. When you say relax, they say, I am relaxed. You can see them. and they can't do it. They cannot relax. So dandelion flower essence is a lovely one for people who try too hard and can't relax. And I often get those kind of people, the strong constitution, people who are obviously very tight and strong and inflexible, to make their own dandelion flower oil. So it's a really nice thing to do in the spring when the dandelions are out. You can make an infused oil. It's really important to get all the water off that if you're going to do that, because fresh plant in an oil will go moldy. So either you do it in a double boiler, or you make sure that you put it in a window ledge with a muslin over the top so that any water can get out. But dandelion flower oil as a massage oil, for someone who's maybe stiff neck and shoulders, that kind of thing, it's a lovely massage oil. And self massage, something you do for yourself.
And what about things like dandelion vinegar or something like that?
Dandelion vinegar, as in the flower or
Yes.
flower? I must admit, I have never used dandelion flower vinegar. I imagine it would be nice. It would not be as strong as the root or the leaf for sure, and the root is even stronger. But I make dandelion flower fritters in the spring. So I dip in water, dip in flour. I usually use gram flour, and then fry them. And you've got bitter and sweet taste, and it's absolutely gorgeous. They're so nice, dandelion flower fritters.
It's
Um,
making me think spring can't be here fast enough now.
so do have a little bit of bitterness, but they're not very bitter. And it's the liver, to treat the liver and the bowels. You need bitter. Is really useful. The bitter taste is really useful,
And that's why you were emphasizing the leaves and the root.
and the roots. Yeah.
So I thought it was good to explore that in more detail with you, because it's good for people to have an idea of what we're talking about when we're talking about the use of plants. And why is it that we might be using one part of a plant versus another part of a plant. And I thought that if we explored that a little bit, that would um, demonstrate the reasons why. So that's very helpful. Thank you. Um, it seems, in fact, reading your book, that as important as everything is, the liver really stands out as being hugely important.
The liver is hugely important, and it goes wrong very easily. And unfortunately, when it's gone wrong, mostly, if you have a standard liver function blood test, it often doesn't show up because it's it, when the liver isn't functioning as it should, it's a low grade thing usually. Yeah, and so it doesn't show up on a blood test, but you can see it in the way someone has maybe headaches, they're tired, their digestion isn't quite as good as it should be, they maybe feel sick, nausea after eating, nausea before eating, without low blood sugar. You know, there's lots of different ways that you can think, okay, this is a liver thing that isn't actually working as it should. Most women with hormonal problems, the liver is really what's at fault. Get the liver working better and it will fix most hormonal problems. So we're diverting a little bit from this here. But the liver is vastly important in everything, and it's actually a fairly easy organ to treat as long as you treat it in the right way. There's some very useful information that a chap called a herbalist, who's now dead, I'm afraid, but he had a good long life. Michael Moore from the United States taught, and it's about using liver herbs to treat, using the right liver herbs. So if you gave someone with an overactive liver heating herbs, it will make everything worse. Yeah, and if you gave someone with an underactive, cold, stagnant liver cooling herbs, that would make everything worse. We've actually got to treat what we find. So, a hot liver needs cooling herbs, a cold liver needs warming herbs, and that's the same for everything, but it's particularly important for the liver. So it's about finding the right herbs for that person's liver. Yeah, it's not saying, right, this herb will treat all livers. You can't do that.
And that's, again, why I'm enjoying reading your book so much, is because the importance of understanding the root of things is so huge. And you outline that beautifully. I remember years ago, I was attending a fabulous workshop with a wonderful vet, Amber Batson, who, although a conventional vet, is also a behaviorist and will look at things like homeopathy to help animals. But I remember her saying that homeopathy is great as long as you have the correct diagnosis. And I thought at the time, well, that's a bit obvious, isn't it? But now I get it, why she said that, because obviously you want the correct diagnosis for whatever treatment you're doing. But reading your book is demonstrating to me the nuances that exist within conditions that look the same, but that will need different approaches. And it's that nuance that I'm finding absolutely fascinating. So I can hear the audience saying, well, how do I know whether my liver is, cool or hot? How do we know?
Well, you look at the person. You look at what symptoms they're having. So, someone with a hot liver is likely to be slightly more overweight. They may crave fatty foods. A cool liver is more likely to be underweight, more likely to have allergies, craving carbs. There's a whole long list. Oily skin with a hot liver, dry skin with a cold liver. But it's also, just look at the person as well, and see what they're doing, and see what foods they like and what they don't like. And there's a lot that you have to look at. Having tools like pulse diagnosis and iridology and tongue diagnosis are all really useful in determining these things. So we all need extra tools to work out a bit more information about patients.
And that's very clear to me, because people don't usually neatly fall into categories. And I bet, somebody's out there thinking, oh, maybe my liver is, maybe it's a hot liver, but then I recognize some of the bits from the cool liver. So, and so this is again back to that necessity to understand that this is very nuanced.
It is, and there's a skill involved, and there's you have to have lots of practice to be thinking about working these things out. You can't always do it for yourself, and it's not neat, hot or cold. There are obviously going to be people in the middle, and most people will fall somewhere in that spectrum. It's just looking to see roughly where they lie in the spectrum. Nobody's absolutely one thing or the other.
And that is coming back to where we started with IBS. That was something that really struck me, as I was reading about it. How many different reasons there might be for IBS. It's IBS. It's not the same for everyone. As in the cause.
That's right. So IBS is just a description, isn't it? So irritable bowel syndrome, it just describes that someone has some bowel symptoms that are uncomfortable and upset them. That's all it is. It doesn't tell you anything more about that, which is why there are so many millions of people with a label of IBS, but it doesn't tell you anything more than that. So IBS can be anything from it can be constipation, it can be diarrhea, and it can be alternating. It can include reflux with acid reflux. It can include bloating, wind, abdominal pains. It can involve any or all of those things. So everybody's IBS is individual. And it's on a spectrum. So, you can have a minor IBS, you can have a major IBS, and then it goes into inflammatory bowel disease, which can be life-threatening. So, it's all on a line, on a string of a spectrum, and it's not one specific thing. Everybody's IBS is different. And again, all the things that I mentioned before, causing inflammation, will have an impact on IBS. The way I work with IBS is sort out the diet, because that's the easy thing to sort out, and then see what else we can deal with. So I always start with diet. In every case I think I've seen, there is always a food intolerance of some kind. So that's where I start. Work out what the food intolerance is. Work out what else they're eating. Maybe they're eating, maybe they're drinking loads of fizzy drinks, loads of sweeteners, loads of sugar, which often people do when they've got a lot of inflammation, because sweet is cooling, and if they're not absorbing nutrients, they're going to be low energy. So they often do go for sugar. It's often a big thing. So it's about looking at the diet, working that out, and then seeing what else needs addressing after that, because that's the easy way to do it. I've got a case study. Would you like me to give you a case study? So this is a lady who had irritable bowel and irritable bladder, and they do often go together, because the same thing affects both bladder and bowel. So this was a 35-year-old woman, and she came to see me with a label of IBS. And she had bloating, nausea, abdominal pains, and diarrhea up to 5 times a day. She also had a history of cystitis, which needed antibiotics 3 to 4 times a year for the last 8 years. So that's a lot of antibiotics as well. Her bladder woke her at least once every night. She knew that her problems were to do with her diet. She knew that. And she tried both wheat and dairy elimination, but couldn't work out for herself which was the problem. She also suffered from premenstrual syndrome, PMS, and painful periods. And again, all these things often go together. So you work on what you can work on, and then you see what else fixes. Her tongue was very coated. So the very coated tongue equals poor elimination. And it was also in the liver area, so I knew that her liver needed attention. When I tested her, it showed dairy and wheat to be a problem. Both of them were a problem. So I started her off on a dairy and wheat-free diet with also reduced inflammatory foods, things like pork and sugar and oranges and ultra-processed foods. So a lot of those reduced. And she also needed to increase her fluids. If your bladder is irritated, often people don't drink enough because they think they'll have to pee more. But actually what that does, if you don't drink enough, then whatever the irritant is doesn't get diluted. So then, it makes it worse. So drinking more will always help. So diet work. I also gave her a supplement with B vitamins and magnesium to help with the PMS. Magnesium will help with other things as well, and as well as some probiotics. So I didn't try with any herbs to start with. It was simply diet, a little bit of supplement, and some probiotics. A month later, she was feeling much better, sleeping well, no bladder problems, and her digestion was much improved. She came back to see me 6 months later, and she came with a repeat of digestive symptoms, particularly abdominal pains and bloating. So another IBS had returned. When I tested her, I found she was intolerant to soya now, unfermented soya, not fermented soya. And I discovered she'd been using soya milk, soya yogurt, and soya in foods every day. So her intake had increased massively when she stopped dairy. She was also having problems with PMS, slow mood, and fatigue again. So I made her some herbs. So I gave her some herbs this time. Herbs to balance the hormones, herbs for the liver, and bowels. So things like, I gave her St. John's wort actually, which is great for liver support. It gets the liver working more efficiently. So she stayed on that formula with magnesium and B vitamins for 3 months, which time everything was improved. Her digestive problems improved, the bladder improved, and no more PMS. So basically diet is absolute key for nearly everybody. And that will often then remove the cause of stress, and then you can fix them. I will use herbs, depending on what symptoms they have. I might use herbs. So for an irritable bladder that doesn't resolve like this, I would use things like marshmallow leaf, corn silk, so the silk around the corn on the cob, that makes a beautiful bladder herb, and it will actually treat cystitis. If you drink it enough, it will treat cystitis. So those 2 herbs are lovely for an irritable bladder. For an irritable bowel, I would use things like the demulcent herb. So again, marshmallow, probably as a powder for the bowel, whereas I might use a tea for the bladder. I would use aloe vera to help soothe the bowel. I would use ginger. Ginger is a really good one for if someone has any gut spasms. with IBS. That's a super one. Maybe for after gastroenteritis or something like that, gut spasms. And ginger is so nice. People who are a bit hot probably shouldn't have it, but if you like ginger, then it's probably fine. Your body will tell you whether you should or not. So actually, IBS is fairly straightforward. So diet and stress, and actually dysbiosis as well, because if you've had a long history of constipation and or diarrhea, then your gut microbiome is going to be up the chute. So you definitely need to do probiotics or fermented foods. So that will make a difference too, because the wrong microbes in your microbiome will actually cause inflammation, because we've got microbes in there that will prevent inflammation. So that will make a difference to the inflammation too.
So how would we address having the wrong microbes in there?
Well, you would either use probiotics or you take fermented foods. Simple, it's that, and it's usually a long-term thing. Just a month probably isn't enough. If you've had IBS with wonky bowels for several years, then you will need probiotics or fermented foods for probably 3, 4, 5, 6 months. So foods are the best way to go. It's cheapest and nicest and best way to go. And most of us will benefit from having fermented foods all the time anyway. Yeah.
It's again, listening to you, I'm just thinking about what a beautiful way to work this is. And you were saying, 3 months. And 3 months sounds like a long time when we're used to having the pills for instant relief. The difference is that the instant relief often comes with complications and in the way of side effects. Whereas here, what we're looking at is 3 months to heal something that may have been going on for a very long time, and without the obvious side effects that comes with the long list of each bottle of medication, but still very effective. And I find that very, very reassuring, because it seems, one of the things that I really like about this system of healing is that it is encouraging us to actually look after ourselves and learn to connect with our bodies and look after them, which is it's like a lost art in our society.
It is, absolutely, and that's what I see my job as being, to show people how to look after themselves as individuals, because everybody needs to do different things. And the thing with taking a medication, yes, you will get a quick result, but as soon as you stop taking that medication, you're back to where you were before, and you may be even worse than you were before. So fine, if you really want to take medication all your life, then, which obviously a lot of people do, with all the side effects, and then you have to take more medication for those side effects and so on and so on. Fine, do it that way, but this way, my way, is far better. And it's not as though you're going from you're not going to wait 3 months to get better. You've got to wait. It's a gradual process. So within that 3 months, within say 3 weeks, I reckon most things to do with the gut are improved. And if they're not, then something else needs doing. Yeah. So it's a slow process, but it's really worth doing properly, and learning how to look after yourself.
It is. And it's interesting because with my therapist hat on, I spend a lot of time with my clients showing them that A, they need to look after themselves, and B, how to do that. And I always end up in the kitchen. It's in the kitchen and sleep. So it's food and sleep that
Yeah.
I always come back to, and forever encouraging them to cook. And oh no, I haven't got enough time. Okay, so let's look at what time we've got here to play with and see what we can do. And just looking at things like batch cooking and etc. And fermenting foods doesn't take a great deal of time, because it's a process. The process takes time, but the actual preparation doesn't, particularly if we have food processors.
Yeah.
So I find this very heartening, and listening to you, and I really hope that aside from providing people with very important information about what could be a very simply solved problem of inflammation in the body, and ideas about how to begin to address it, I hope it inspires everyone to look at self-care more, and to look at healing in a wider context.
Yes, that's exactly what we need to do. Spending time talking and just telling people this is how you do it, and this is how you do it for you. When in a consultation, I will spend probably at least half the time talking about how they should eat, how they need to eat, and telling them how to do it. And they get handouts and all sorts of information, because that's the key. The most difficult patient is the person who is not interested in food. That's the most difficult person, I think, to deal with, because I only think I've ever had maybe half a dozen, but they see food as fuel, and it doesn't matter whether it tastes good or anything.
And indeed, some not even that. It's, and I have many clients who have become totally disconnected from food and see it as nothing more than a terrible chore. And I have to remind them that food is about self-care and nourishing and nurturing the body. And once they understand that, then we're away. But this is the food is fundamental, and it's not just fundamental because our bodies need it. It's fundamental because it's about our relationship with ourselves, and whether or not we are prepared to nourish and nurture ourselves. So many people say, oh, I can cook for others, but not for myself. There's a problem right there.
Yes. Self-love, yes.
Yeah, and so it comes right back to that again. So this is why it's a joy to be able to have this conversation with you. Thank you so much once again, Christine.
No problem. Nice to see you again.
And the book that we have been discussing, once again, is Digestion, the Key to Good Health, a link to which will be in the description box, along with information about how we could find Christine. So do you have a website, Christine?
I'm afraid I don't at the moment. My son tells me he's going to do one, but I don't at the moment. But I am on Facebook and on Instagram, both under my own name. So,
Well, I'll be finding you on Facebook and Instagram and ensuring that those links are in the description box. Thank you so much once again.
Thank you. Thanks, Anna.
And thank you all for watching. Until next time, goodbye.